Hello again. Welcome back to SkillOn. This training video is part of the Smart Live Professional English project dedicated to meeting skills, and in particular this video focuses on managing online and telephone meetings, which I think many of you will agree are some of the most difficult meetings to manage for various reasons, which we'll have a look at. And so we'll look at some guidelines to help you manage these meetings. We'll also, in this video, look at the skill, which I think is very useful in all types of meetings, to summarize a project or a program. So to be able to give simple information to explain to other people what a particular project or program involves, and also we'll end with skills for concluding all types of meetings effectively and professionally. So first of all, we want to look at some general considerations, shall we say some key considerations in relation to online meetings. So what is it that's different between an online meeting and a traditional face-to-face meeting? If you take a minute to consider, perhaps you'll think about problems with the audio. Sometimes the audio is intermittent or there can be some interference, and so hearing people can be more difficult. Another problem can be a mismatch in the timing between the video streaming and the audio, so it's harder to lip read, to read people's lips. Another factor, of course, I don't know if it reflects your experience, but that quite often people are obliged now to wear a mask during meetings, so that makes it impossible to lip read, because if they're participating in a meeting in their office where there are more than a certain number of people, they may be obliged to wear a mask. So that's another factor. And some people, for various reasons, may opt to deactivate their webcam. So that really makes a difference in context. So let's have a look at how we can approach online meetings effectively. So first of all, one thing that you can do, as we said, if there's a problem with audio, it's a good idea to speak more slowly. Another suggestion, which many of your colleagues have mentioned, is that because on platforms you're going to find that a lot of the space is going to be taken up both with the faces of the various participants, and then there's going to be the space for the chat, for the various functions, and so there's going to be less space available for your presentation. So you need to modify any slides that you intend to show with bigger font and less information on each slide. Third point is take care with your appearance. It goes without saying, but I'm sure many of you have participated in online meetings with somebody who's perfectly dressed on their top half, and then the doorbell rings and they have to get up to answer the door, and there's a mismatch between the top half and the waist down. So these, but in any case, also it's useful to be careful with your hair, your clothes and your face. So it's useful to have a quick check in the mirror before the online meeting begins. Fourth point, it's obvious, be familiar with the technology, but actually it's not so simple, because I know that Regione Emilia-Romagna, generally regional government, normally uses Microsoft Teams, but in various projects and with different people that you need to have meetings with, there you can be asked to meet on Zoom, on GoToMeeting, on all the various platforms which are now available, And each platform involves downloading it, becoming familiar, and so it can be quite stressful. So you'll probably need help with that unless you're an IT expert. Another aspect of participating in online meetings in relation to speaking clearly, I recommend you think carefully about the use of plain English. We've looked at this before, but in this context, in meetings, if possible, use fewer words, so less words, a smaller number of words to make your point, to express your idea. Then separate your ideas into simple, single, short sentences so that everybody can follow, even if there's a problem with audio. And another point which is nice is in the Plain English campaign, which is a campaign which has been running for a long time in the UK to try to convince public administration, banks, hospitals to communicate with clear English. They often say that an important thing is get straight to the point, even be a bit punchy, so that in a meeting, say what you need to say, the important thing quite soon, and then you can add other details. The fourth point sounds simple. Select language that participants will know. So use appropriate language depending on the level of specific knowledge of your participants. Now that's easy if you know that the people attending are all agronomists, or they're all engineers, or they're all ICT experts. It's easy to use technical language with a lot of specific words. We call it jargon, il gergo, and that's perfectly appropriate. However, if the people attending are coming from different fields, from different sectors, with different experience and knowledge, it's going to be useful to use more general language to make sure that as many people as possible understand. And also, if you use acronyms, you're going to need to define the meaning of them. Good. So, another aspect that we want to look at is what is said frequently in relation to online meetings. So, people have said these various things, and I want to ask you, do you agree? So the first one, it can be harder or more difficult to pick up or to read, to identify social cues. What do we mean by that? Well, if you remember, between 60 and 90% of communication normally face-to-face consists of body language and cues which are not verbal language. And so the raising of an eyebrow, a sort of movement can express irritation, or the physical stance can express disagreement. There are lots of cues. These can be much harder, much more difficult to pick up on in an online context. So we need to bear that in mind. To bear in mind, tenere in considerazione. Second point, it's more difficult to judge when it's our turn to speak, because again the body language is not so clear. So you need a very good person who's managing the meeting, who makes sure that everybody is invited to speak and who's looking out for cues, either in the chat if somebody said I'd like to make a point, or people can raise their hand to indicate that they'd like to speak, because it's not so clear. But as we know, it's very important that people are able to express their opinions. Third point, it's trickier meaning more difficult, to understand if someone wants to say something as well. So if you're the person managing the meeting, controlling the meeting, mentoring the meeting, how do you know it if somebody else wants to speak? So again, you're going to need to both check in with all the tools that you have available in the chat and raising hands, etc. Plus, you can, before the meeting begins, you can agree on some common ground rules for the meeting so that everybody knows what is acceptable behaviour and the best way to act in the different situations. Fourth point I think is really interesting, that in many situations there's not going to be eye contact, or the people's faces, particularly in a large meeting, is going to be so small that it's difficult to engage in eye contact. And so the result there is the emotional involvement. People in the meeting may feel less involved without this eye contact. So there, to involve these people, again, asking questions, bringing them in other ways is going to be the only solution to keep the meeting effective. So there are some challenges. However, there are also, I think, some advantages of this experience that we've had, this increased experience, because I'm sure you agree that in recent months, a huge percentage of meetings are online for very good reasons. But some recent trends reflecting that situation, and my question is, does this reflect your experience, is that now people are planning shorter meetings, wherever possible, just a 1 hour meeting, and as a result, they're reducing the number of topics or items to be discussed in each meeting. So they're much more specific, and many people have said they think this is really positive, because this means that with a smaller number of focused meetings, they're much more productive, and then when you finish, you can get on with something else. But it means that you need to concentrate for the short period that there are and say as much as you can effectively as there is time for. So now this is an example of some of the etiquette for online meetings, and I wonder if these reflect your experience as well, and if you agree with them. Point number 1, mute yourself when not speaking. I think everybody agrees that that's necessary. What does it mean to mute yourself? It means to deactivate or switch off your microphone when you're not speaking. It's common courtesy, but not only is it common courtesy, if you forget to mute yourself, you could find yourself having a private conversation with somebody and everybody can hear. And this happens again and again with potentially extremely embarrassing results. So I'm sure you know it, but it's a good thing to remember. Point number 2, be on time. I don't need to say that. We're in Emilia-Romagna. People respect being on time. If you're unable to be on time, it's a good courtesy to write in the chat, here I am, very sorry to have arrived late, it's good to be here. Just one line makes all the difference. Point number 3, make sure your technology works correctly. Now, I'm probably preaching to people who know exactly that their technology works correctly, but it's important to make sure, especially if the meeting is important, that everything is set correctly so that you're not going to have any problem in terms of technology. Point number 4, use technology to fully engage remote participants. I mentioned that point before. So using the chat, using the raised hands, you can bring in and engage with and involve people who maybe you can't see their face. They've got the webcam switched off, but you can use the voice or send a message on chat to bring them in, and if they don't feel like speaking, they can answer a question in the chat, especially if the meeting is in English. Some people may feel embarrassed to speak in a really large meeting, but they can participate in the chat quite effectively and have the satisfaction of having made their point. The last point here, choosing the proper software and hardware, we can leave that to your ICT experts because they've got lots of experience on that line. Some more guidelines relating to etiquette. Number 1 on the list is important here, but I'm sure you all know it. It's the using work appropriate clothing. because in fact, representing Regione Emilia-Romagna, you are meeting in a professional context. So even if you're meeting from home, it's important that what you wear would be exactly the same as what you would wear in a meeting in one of the main meeting rooms in Aldamoro. So this is important for a professional appearance. Frame the camera correctly, make sure it's set, not looking down on you and not from with the camera coming from below you and just showing your chin. Make sure the light is correct, that you don't have a window behind you, because in that case your face would be dark and it would be difficult for people to read your participation. The other point, look into the camera, fundamental, because if you want this limited time of the meeting to be effective, we want the engagement and people want to see your presence taking the meeting forward. And the last point, that pay attention, yes, of course. Right, now let's move on to look at some guidelines for summarising and updating people. Very often it's necessary to be able to just give some basic information about a project or a programme. Here I've chosen one project, which is Vela, which is transversal across Emilia-Romagna, and whereas the Adrian programme is spanning different countries. Both of them I think are quite an important and cross through all the directorates, so I thought it could be useful to practice summarising these. So in order to give a summary, how do you go about it? One thing that I suggest that you don't do is to take a summary in Italian and then translate it word for word. What I strongly suggest you do is to take a blank piece of paper and just start by identifying the keywords that you want to focus on, and then using those keywords create some sentences and then put them in order to link them. So let's have a look at some guidelines for summarising. So as I said, identifying the key points, not translating from Italian, but even if your English is basic, it's a good exercise. So identify the key points, put them into order, sequence them, then find or select linking words to connect the points, check that the sentences are not too long, that they're as short as possible, and sum up to conclude. Now let's look at one of our projects. In fact, the first that we're going to look at is the Vela project. The Vela project, so what is it? In fact, some information you can get from the logo. It's smart working for public administration, and the V stands for veloce, and in fact the E of veloce is used, the connectivity, it's quite smart, I think. And then L for leggero, light, A for agile. So this logo already gives us an idea what Vela is about. So let's have a look at some more expressions as to how you can describe it. So what is it? So to begin with, it's designed to introduce and promote good practice and tools for smart working in public administration. So we've already seen smart working and public administration. A nice verb is designed, progettato, to introduce and promote good practice and tools, instruments, methods for smart working in public administration, and over the last months it really has been very necessary. Good. Other information you can add is a historical background. So you can give some dates. So this is an example. So introduced in May 28 and implemented in 2019. Look at the way we're giving the dates. VELA responds to or reflects the need or the requirement to accelerate innovation in public administrations. And in fact, many of your colleagues have said, thanks to VELA, the Emilia-Romagna regional government was able to continue working effectively throughout the lockdowns. Let's look at another way that you can add information. You can say a linking word in practical terms. So in practical terms, also including an icon, it involves, and then you can list 3 bullet points, very useful in a summary: migration to cloud technology, the adoption of social collaboration tools, and training to develop a new digital leadership. So this is a simple way to summarize the information. Another linking word, you can say also or in addition, and you can add another point, the aim, the word we've seen before, and again you're listing 3 bullet points, is to increase efficiency, to reduce management costs for public administration, and create a better work-life balance. And this is a way that you're reflecting the human aspect of work. So you have the symbol of connectivity, and then also, or to be precise, is another way you can link. To be precise, a specific objective is to define good practice to develop ideal conditions for smart working. And to add more and to continue, you can ask questions in your summary. What does that mean? How can you do that? So one way is through the use of spaces to encourage a sense of belonging. We've got another set of bullet points, very useful in a summary. A sense of belonging, un senso di appartenenza. Another objective and the use of spaces to have a positive impact on styles of working so that people can collaborate more easily and in a more user-friendly way. And third point, nice use of language, to foster, meaning to encourage, active responsibility for one's work. That's a very important point. So short sentences and bullet points to add information. And here, the kit, communication, training, these are all part of the reuse kit, which is rolled out to other public administrations to help them, those who would like to adopt this method of working. And the kit involves communication, training, KPIs, the key performance indicators and monitoring, smart spaces, we've looked at those, technology in the different levels depending on the network and the potential and the hardware and software in each local authority and region. Sixth point, organisation and performance. And the seventh point, in terms of the freedom of employees to work with smart working, but also the minimum discipline. And another point, the Italian word sicurezza, which in English has to be translated with 2 words. Safety, meaning safety in the workplace, meaning preventing accidents, and making sure your eyes are not too tired, and security in terms of network security, protocols, firewalls, all of those aspects. Right, so we've had a look at one brief summary. Now we're going to look at another summary, but here we're looking at a programme which is a much bigger, and this is an Interreg programme where the Emilia-Romagna regional government was named the managing authority in the first programme and also now for the second programme up until 2027. And so what is the role? It's the managing authority, and simple description of what it does. It provides information on the programme, selects projects, and monitors implementation. So you've got a map there that shows you the extent of the area, the number of regions involved in this programme. In addition, there's another way that you can add information. You can say in addition, or also, or plus, or furthermore, if you want to be a bit formal. The Emilia-Romagna regional government is responsible for the efficient management, look at the pronunciation, management, and implementation of the operational programme, which of course has been decided at a European level, but the operational programme, the implementation and management, is managed from Emilia-Romagna regional government level. And managing authorities in general are expected to implement principles of sound financial management. This, I think, is interesting because there are clear criteria for how these projects are managed from a financial point of view. Sound is an interesting word because if you think of sound, you think of sound in terms of audio and music. Here it means solid and rigid and professional. Good. Another word, to be precise. So the aim of the programme is to drive the policy, so to act as a policy driver. Remember, policy is la politica or le politiche. To drive is to manage or to guide. And to act as a governance innovator for the benefit of how many? More than or over 70 million people in the Adriatic and Ionian region. So as you can see, it's a big project. And in a summary, I think it can be appropriate to show some pictures which give an idea of this European transnational programme. Some of these pictures reflect the type of content of the projects, which respect the environment and look at ways of improving the resilience of the waterways and the cultural heritage, the natural heritage, and also cities and connectivity with the ports, the railways, etc. So I think pictures and photos can be very useful for giving a summary of a programme, or videos are great as well. And in addition, another picture here which shows the importance of the sea and the marine waterways and the importance of keeping these seas clean and replenishing fish stock, etc. So here we've got again some bullet points. So it's a programme that invests in regional innovation systems, cultural and natural heritage, listen to the H there, heritage, il patrimonio, environmental resilience, that's a buzzword, everyone's talking about that, sustainable transport, using minimum energy and minimum pollution, and capacity building. And to sum up, sometimes it can be very useful in a summary to superimpose on a geographical area some of the achievements in the first 5 years of the programmes, how the clusters have been evolved to develop different activities, the number of projects that have been approved, the number of countries. There's a lot of information that you can sum up on this type of graphic way visually. Good. So at this point, I'd now like to move on and look at how we can manage meetings by phone, because also in programs like the Adrian Interreg program, where so many countries, different European countries are involved, part of the EU or aspiring members, some situations, especially for managing audits and meetings, it's going to be necessary to make contact by telephone if there's something which needs to be discussed urgently. We're going to be looking at telephone situations in 3 contexts. First of all, setting up the call. Now, this slide reflects the request of some of your colleagues, because sometimes not only do you need to contact people within a program like Adrian, but also some of your colleagues need to speak with people in Brussels from the EU and also from other European countries and abroad. So here are just some expressions which I hope you'll find useful. You can begin with good morning or good afternoon. This is much better than just saying hello, because you need a long word, because if the communication is interrupted and you don't hear the beginning, it's not a problem, because good morning, you're not giving any important information. Plus, it gives time for who's listening to begin to get acclimatized to your voice. And then you can specify where you're calling from. I'm calling from Bologna. Notice we use the present continuous, not I call from, but I'm calling from Bologna, or I'm calling from the Emilia-Romagna Regional Government. To introduce yourself, you don't say I am. In Italian you say sono. We say this is Anna Rossi speaking, or simply Anna Rossi speaking, or it's Anna Rossi speaking, or if you prefer, my name is Anna Rossi. But this is technical telephone language from Emilia-Romagna Regional Government. Then, if you're not calling for yourself, but you're calling on behalf of one of your colleagues, you can use this expression, da parte di. So I'm calling on behalf of the President, or I'm calling on behalf of the Transport Regional Minister. Then you can specify who you'd like to speak with. I'd like to speak with, and then you give the name or the role of the person. Then, once you're through to the person, you can again repeat, good morning, I'm calling to confirm the meeting of tomorrow, whatever it is. Next, let's move on, and we're going to look at resolving technical issues, because on some occasions there are some emergencies where it's necessary to contact either your suppliers or technical assistance by phone if there is an emergency. Here are some expressions that you can use. If it's super urgent, you can forget the good morning and just say immediately hello. I'm calling from Bologna, giving the context, and then describing the problem. We are experiencing, or you can put it together, we're experiencing problems with, and then you'd specify the system, the device, the hardware, the software, whatever it is. Then the item we purchased is not responding as it should, or it's not working correctly. So you specify what the problem is. Then you can underline the urgency of the situation with an expression like, this is extremely urgent because we have an important meeting this afternoon, or because we have 1,000 people unable to do a particular job because of this problem. So you underline the urgency. Again, keeping your voice polite, because you need to work together with your supplier or the customer assistance, and that can be difficult if the emergency really is acute. So it's a good skill to keep calm and use simple, clear, polite English. And then again, underlining, we need to find a solution either in the next hour, or this afternoon, or entro oggi, by the end of the day, or within the next 3 hours. You specify the time frame, and then to conclude you could say, we really appreciate your collaboration in this, to encourage your supplier to be proactive. So next, ending your phone call, some expressions, the ones we've seen before. Good, right, I think we've covered everything. Thank you very much for your help. This expression we've seen before. We look forward to hearing from you. Notice that in Italian we say sentirla. In English we say hearing from you. And again, this we look forward to is encouraging dialogue It's a very positive expression. And then to conclude, goodbye, because you're busy, you need to get on, and also the technical assistance. So you want to be to the point, clear, and resolve the situation as quickly as you can. So now, just to conclude and sum up, let's look again at some language we've looked at before for closing meetings of whatever type they are. So whether it's an online meeting, whether it's a face-to-face meeting or a telephone meeting, not necessarily here technical assistance, but some meetings even you have to have on the telephone. So right, I'm afraid time is up. Thank you all for your contributions. We'll circulate the minutes and then you'll specify when you think you'll be able to circulate the minutes. And using the same expression again, we look forward to speaking again in the next meeting or when we see you at the Congress or whatever it is. And then to conclude, have a good evening, have a good weekend. Do you remember we saw that before? Not have you a good weekend, have a good evening. And in the COVID-19 situation, which we hope will soon be over, but we fear it may stay with us for a while, the expression frequently used is stay safe, and then to conclude, goodbye. So this brings us to the end of this series of training videos. I very much hope that you found some guidelines and some expressions which you will be able to use in your future meetings, and that will, as I said, reduce any possibility of headaches, and where you will be able to smile as much as possible and to contribute with pleasure rather than with trepidation. So again, thank you for your attention, and it's been a pleasure on our path. Bye-bye.